Now open Mary, Our Lady of Peace Mausoleum in Flushing, New York. Secure your family's future with 10% down, no taxes, and 0% interest financing for up to 10 years on pre-need crypts and cremation niches starting at just $25 per month. Protect your loved ones with the gift of pre-planning. Visit them today at Mount St. Mary Cemetery. Call 718-353-1560. That's 718-353-1560 or go to ccbklyn.org to learn more. That's ccbklyn.org.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
And joining us now is former federal prosecutor Doug Burns. Doug, we want to get to the other big news of the day. Eric Adams, of course, in court. He was arraigned today, and he said, I am not guilty. Where is this headed, Doug Burns? You're a former federal prosecutor. You also know Damian Williams, who is the guy prosecuting Eric Adams.
You know, an arraignment's, nothing all that dramatic, honestly, not to take the buzz out of it. But you go in, you waive a reading of the charge. This was 57 pages. So, of course, but even when it's 2 pages, you waive a reading, you enter a plea of not guilty, which is just a legal formality, by the way. People make that dramatic. He's saying he's not guilty. Not necessarily. It's just a legal plea. And then, of course, he was released in his own recognizance. He's not, I'm chuckling, he's not a flight risk. He's mayor of New York City.
Yeah, obviously. Now, listen, Doug, what are your thoughts about this politicization sort of angle? His defense is that, I complained about the migrants. I did, I spoke out against, and look, the timing, as we were talking about earlier, Ed, it is interesting. He's about to go fly in and meet with Biden, and suddenly on the plane, he gets told that his campaign, major staffer, has her home raided. It was the first of many. The timing is pretty interesting. And then he complains again, and then another one gets raided, and you've got even President Trump saying it looks a little political.
It does look political. He was a very open complainer about the Biden, border crisis machinations. There's good news and bad news in that. The good news is ostensibly he could try to raise that. The bad news is, A, selective prosecution is difficult, and then B, it begs the question on how strong the case itself is. On the case itself, I'm finding it fascinating to see the different responses, Professor Turley and others. I'm underwhelmed, obviously, by being upgraded to a first-class seat from a business seat. That is really low on the bribery continuum. But having said that, if in fact, and this is an open question, if in fact they can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he got $10 million in matching campaign funds that he wasn't entitled to, and he knew it, and that'll be a little bit of a tall order, all of those components I just laid out, got $10 million, knew he wasn't entitled to it, knew that there were straw donors, then that could turn into a fairly serious case. And then the other bad news for the mayor is they do have stuff in the indictment about, erasing stuff and messages. And, I've stood in courtrooms on both sides of court. Ladies and gentlemen, if you did nothing wrong, why are you erasing things? So there's a lot to it. I have to digest it a little bit more. But, on its face, it's a fairly serious case.
Doug, you handle the quid here. That is weak. That is upgrading, things like that. How about the quo? Is that strong at all? That did a thing with respect to the fire inspections before the president of Erdogan came to open the new building?
That's a very, very important question because your question tracks right into two law cases. One, the McDonnell case, where the former governor of Virginia was exonerated in the Supreme Court on these type of quid pro quo grounds. Then there was a recent case from the Supreme Court differentiating between gratuities and bribes. So there's some legal room. Now, to answer your question, again, really good one, they say that he rushed through the approval for the Turkish embassy, but at the same time, you're going to see arguments about, it's good for New York City, so on and so forth. It's going to be very fact-specific. In other words, were there really serious problems that the fire department raised and would not have approved the building on, and then they were pressured to go the other way? I mean, that's the classic example of how an indictment, is a lot of fanfare and so on, but we need to hear the real story, really getting into the nuts and bolts. And then they do cite some other stuff about, providing favors and assistance. But again, I don't think it's necessarily or automatically that overwhelming. We have to wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the big question. You hit on the point, Gov Patterson, too, about the 800 number. It was like real quick.
It was just kind of shocking right in the middle of this presentation that they asked for help for the public to finish it off.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of those TV commercials you see late at night where they're screaming at you to keep you awake or to come back from the bathroom or whatever you're doing when you're trying to watch a show. And I just thought it was a little, I wouldn't say unprofessional, but it just seemed gauche.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you can read that two ways. I mean, if they're openly asking for help on the case, one could argue, then they need to fill in holes in the case. I mean, you can interpret it in all different ways.
Right.
The other editorial, obviously, was it really necessary to bring this now? How about waiting till after the election?
Well, that it begs the question. They want to do it now, clearly, and I think part of it is the timing of the U.S. attorney, because he's there only until serves at the pleasure of this administration.
And Doug, finally, did you read?
Yeah, real quick, we got to go.
You read the New York Post article where the Adams administration's lawyers wrote to try to quash the investigation in what really looked like something that was written by a student radical group.
I did see that. I mean, yeah, I agree. There's a number of amateurish moves sort of going on all around now. Yep. But again, we'll wait and see.
All right, Doug Burns, we love you. Thank you. Former federal prosecutor, thank you very much.
Most tax pros leave a message.
It's Jane. I'm moving on to a TurboTax expert who beat your price. Adam Devine, tell him how I feel.
Hey, tax pro, she's been thinking twice. Best believe TurboTax will beat your price. This is a tax break.
Switch to a TurboTax Live expert and we'll beat what you paid your pro last tax season. Make the switch at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice. TurboTax full service only. Sign up by 12/20/2024 and file by 4/1/2025. Full details at TurboTax.com/beatyourprice.